So I'm just going to be doing a brief update with news that is going on currently. I did more of bullet points this time like I used to do. I'm not deep diving into one topic and one topic alone. That would take too much time and you'd miss too much news. So I'm going to go along with doing that. So we have quite a bit of news that has happened, especially in the last couple of weeks. And it's been hard to keep up with everything. But so we're going to start from mid-May all the way to currently. May 28th, 2022, China created their first batch of intelligent standby ships powered by liquefied natural gas. They have produced up to 4 vessels as of this moment. In the South China Sea, China conducted live fire multi-subject combat drill in the ocean to, quote, verify the troops' operational, commanding, and coordinating abilities in realistic battlefield scenarios, unquote. So they're basically, everyone knows lately, if you watch the news, everything that's going on with China and Russia. A lot of what's happening in China is being put in the back burner of things, and so people aren't really paying attention unless you're deep diving into certain things. And what's going on is obviously America and Taiwan did their own military unified drills to signify essentially their unity powers to China. And what had happened is China basically this last week was like, F you, we are going to show our magnificent new toys, and this is what's going on. And they also did another military drill that was over the defense military area of Taiwan. That was a whole nother story, lots and lots of info. But yeah, so as of December 13th, 2021, we're going back to last year. The U.S. exited from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, which was created by Russia and the United States in 1972. I talked about that also in my last video about how they were doing America and Russia were essentially fighting over the Cuban Missile Crisis and what happened there, and then Russia trying to set foot into Cuba, and so they were threatening each other with nukes, but then they came to a realization that nukes will never solve anything and that they would come to a treaty and never nuke anyone. Well, America decided to step out of that treaty and caused so much haywire within the American world and everything going with it. So, quote, no U.S. test has ever involved a target missile traveling at the speed necessary to reach the lower 48 states from North Korea. No test has ever involved a salvo of 2 or more incoming ICBMs or has appeared to have included realistic countermeasures, such as decoys shaped like real warheads. Only one test was conducted at night when the incoming missile was not illuminated by the sun, and it was a failure. Essentially, if North Korea fires a single simple ICBM at Alaska during the daytime, then we should be fine if we spot the launch preparations and get lucky. As a matter of policy, the United States does not aim to defend the homeland against a Chinese or Russian nuclear attack. Rather, it seeks to deter such attacks through the threat of retaliation. However, both Beijing and Moscow worry that in the future the United States may be able to deploy missile defenses capable of negating their nuclear forces and leaving them vulnerable to the corner. They have responded accordingly. The test of the tens of billions of dollars that the U.S. has poured into homeland missile defense since 2001 has proved ineffective, and they fueled armed races with China and Russia that have undermined U.S. security. Basically, we are the big F. We are the big F, and we are going to have some issues when it comes to missiles. And also of last year, but now that Russia has essentially been like, oh, look at our new nukes and we can get past your defense system. Now America is like, oh, they don't know what to do. And now that they're sending all this money over to Ukraine to help them with the crisis of the war, we don't have enough money for the situation that's happening with China. We also don't have enough money that's going to give us a defense system to help us with nuclear threats with the homeland here. We are basically screwed. And the United States has screwed the pooch, and we are fending for ourselves. And this is the reality of things. So on March 18th, 2021, coronavirus circulated undetected months before first COVID-19 case in Wuhan, China study dates emergencies to as early as October 2019. Regional newspaper reports suggesting that the virus was already actively circulating when Chinese authorities enacted public health measures. I was going to continue using this site, which I will link all that down below. But then I realized, as I looked to the bottom and finished my reading, that it was funded by the National Institute of Health, the NIH. So I kind of went and disregarded that, but I mean, it does make sense, and I believe it does make sense when I go on to continue on with the research and the information that I found currently. October 30th of 2020, the World Health Organization, or known as WHO, released a document on their official site. Quote, barcodes, QR codes, and vaccine vial monitors in the context of COVID-19 vaccine. If you click on the downloaded document, it will give you 6 pages. Now, if you go to page 3 and the second paragraph, it will say, quote, acknowledging the interest in this innovation as highlighted by Gavi's Vaccine Innovation Prioritization Strategy. Inclusion on the primary packaging is optional. However, if implemented, they may not take the place of statutory information printed on labels or leaflets. There are multiple uses of barcodes and QR codes. However, systems requirements to make use of barcodes on primary packaging for traceability are significant investments that take time to develop, and they exist in very few markets. This use case has been limited to some high-income markets and some medical products, including devices and injectables. Research on various use of identifiers on primary packaging may be beneficial, as discussed in the section below on pilot evaluations and tests, unquote. So this new QR code and barcode that the World Health Organization wants to use is a 2-dimensional. Now, what we have in grocery stores and everything of that matter, it is 1-dimensional. So this would contain more information, hold more information, and it's also able to be transmitted to telephones and such more so than the one barcode that we see in grocery stores. As we go on to the bottom of page 3, you will see that this was by the UNICEF in September 2019. If you go to the official UNICEF site, they state, UNICEF and the WHO have recognized that the benefits of the use of harmonized global or international identification and serialization standards on vaccines to improve visibility and traceability. Starting 1st of October 2019 for vaccine tenders backed by Gavi financing issued by UNICEF, it will be a requirement to have GS1 barcoding on the secondary packaging by the latest of December 31st of December 2021. And implementation roadmap will be developed in constellation with partners in the coming months. In parallel, WHO is developing a policy to be made available by the end of 2019 to provide high-level advice for the national regulatory authorities on the use of track and tracing technologies and standards, including GS1, in the supply chain of healthcare products, on the governance of the IT system supporting this I'm having such a hard time today. I just can't. Oh. In the supply chain of healthcare products, on the governance of the IT system supporting this implementations, and on data management. This was again published in September 10th of 2019, before there was even an outbreak of COVID. So essentially, they were planning right before COVID came out. They were saying, hey, we're going to do this new system, and this is how we're going to track people. This is how we're going to track the doses. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that tracking the doses in general is a bad thing. You need to know what product is good and what product is bad. That's definitely a good thing. But what I'm going to get into is that they also use the two-dimensional barcode as a way of tracking your information and who got the COVID-19 vaccine and who didn't. So, as we go on November 9th of 2021, on the official website of the CDC, they published directions on how to access one's vaccination status with a QR code. It tells you step by step how to receive that information. So, it will tell you exactly how to do it and see your personal information that they gathered from scanning that barcode. So when you got your little vaccination card saying, I got the COVID-19 vaccination, yay me, it will tell you step by step on how to go get your personal information that they kept from that barcode. And you can receive it online, you can download it, you can print it, you can do anything with it. So essentially, they're tracking you. I mean, they've already kind of done that with their vaccination paperwork for like children and stuff. But when they were only allowing certain people to come in because they had their vaccine, like to concerts, to restaurants, to this, to that, that was how they were starting to control, essentially. And they took this as a positive thing. Now, I personally don't see that as a positive thing. I never will see that as a positive thing. I believe in vaccines, and I always will believe in vaccines because science can be good. But when you have a problem with creating a virus, which it has been proven that it was created in Wuhan, and then you push out this vaccine so quickly, and then you notice that Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson are making millions of dollars off these vaccines so quickly, like that, that's not something that I believe is a good thing, especially when they are tracking you. They want their money. I don't believe that this is for a good cause in any shape or form. But I digress. Let us continue. If you go onto the official Gavi vaccine site, you will see links to the contributors financially. Strolling down to the annual contributors and proceeds, 30th of September 2019. If you click that link, a graph of the contributors will show. Scrolling down past the countries, go to line 44, you will see the top private company is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Oh, how funny is that? That's not surprising at all. We know that they are the biggest funders for vaccines, and we know their history in Africa and India. If you don't, that's a whole nother subject, and you should look into that. The grand total in 2000 to 2010 was 1,233, which was 29% of the grand total that they needed and was contributed. This is not just from the private investors. This is from all the countries, all the companies, all the private investors. So they contributed about 29% of the fund. Then if you go to 2011, 2015, they were 1,237, which was about 18%. They kept it as the same as the previous year, but upped it just like 2%. But now if you go to 2016, 2020, it goes up to 1,475, which is 17% of the annual income totally of the contributors. Then from 2021 to 2037, now that's a big gap there. Like, as in, like, that's a big amount of years. That's over a decade. So that makes me question why from 2021 to 2037, that would be a whole chunk when the others were a decade at most versus a couple years. Whatever. That 2021 to 2037 has not been posted because obviously it has gone up until 2037. My conspiracy theory on this is that they plan on, pushing out more vaccines and viruses to make more money. And they don't want the public to see it quite yet until their master plan is gone through. That is just me. I will say it how I think it because logically all the information is there. It is lining up. It is making sense. So, yeah. But if you scroll down to line 155, number 11, you will see the United States has pledged $1 billion to Berlin in 2015 to 2018 and $800 million in 2016 to 2018. In 2015, the U.S. also provided $20 million to Gavi for Ebola vaccine stockpile once a licensed vaccine becomes available. I thought by 2015, they had already had a vaccine for Ebola. The National Pulse published an article on May 22nd, 2022, stating that Wuhan was flagged for creating, quote, contagious pathogens, which was monkeypox. If you go and read the article, they say the Wuhan Institute of Virology assembled a monkeypox virus genome, allowing the virus to be identified through PCR tests using a method researchers flagged for potential creating a contagious pathogen. The study was first published in February of 2022. Weird. Just a few months before the latest international outbreak of monkeypox, which appeared and has now reached the United States and Britain. And a lot of countries that are considered NATO allies. How funny is that? The paper, which was authored by 9 Wuhan Institute of Virology researchers and published in the lab's quarterly scientific journal, also follows the wide-scale use of PCR tests to identify COVID-19 positive individuals. As an efficient tool for assembling large DNA fragments, TAR assembly has become essential for preparing infectious clones of large DNA NRA viruses, explained researchers. The paper acknowledged that TAR applied in virology research could also raise potential security concerns, especially when the assembled product contains a full set of genetic material that can be recovered into a contagious pathogen. The unearthed study follows the Wuhan Institute of Virology conducting similar research into strains of bat coronavirus that could infect humans while admitting its facilities lacked proper laboratory safety protocols. Funny. Weird. While speaking at the event via telephone, Wang repeatedly emphasized that his lab and China lacked any meaningful regulations of dual-use research. Quote, "There's no regulations in China. There's no regulations on the identification of some dual-use research, and there's no regulations on the classification of research or the classification of information. Even China The biosafety and biosecurity philosophy is regulated by Chinese scientific community, but the dual-use research is not totally regulated. So we need to have some measure or some special program to raise the concern of principal investigations through training, unquote. As background material from confidential documents note, scientists were manipulating bat coronavirus. One example is where 2 U.S. scientists were conducting research to synthetically generate a non-cultivatable bat virus genetically related to a severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus. The overall goals of the research were to establish strategies for recovery, testing, and of the potential pandemic non-cultivatable virus, and to determine pathways of bat CoV host species adaptations. The research was considered highly significant since it could enable more timely response to potential species jumps and more rapid and more effective public health intervention. The investigators determined that the proposed research would constitute dual-use research of concern. Brennan Center for Justice published an article reporting, quote, new document illuminate the president's secret emergency powers, unquote. If you haven't heard about this, which I didn't, I suspected this was a thing growing up, that the president would have secret powers as a kid, that the president could literally do anything that the president wanted, president of the United States, America. I always suspected that the president literally could do this, but it came to light in my attention that yes, he can definitely do this. So essentially, the president of the United States has powers to do emergency declarations to provide safety for the American people if necessary. And that literally means anything. Does not matter. He could do whatever he wants. And if they seem and deem it necessary, they just go, all right, done. And the problem is when it comes to this happening, we, the American people, don't realize it's happening. We won't know specifically what's coming because they don't release it to the public. In 2004, high-ranking staff with George W. Bush Jr. reviewed the presidential emergency powers. This is also known as PEDS, or Presidential Emergency Action Documents. This was revisited after the 9/11 attack on the U.S. Many of the orders were very broad in their statements. Section 1. Suspend or arm the rules and regulations to any or all facilities or stations for wire communication within the jurisdiction of United States as prescribed by the Commission. Cause a closing of any facility or station for wire communications and the removal, therefore, of its and equipment. So then they go on to talk about restricting American passports, which is also... Oh, man, I need a mental break from the news. It also goes on to talking about restricting American passports. Quote, a passport may be designated as restricted for travel to or for use in any country other than a country with which the United States is at war, where armed hostilities are in progress, or where there is immediate danger to the public health or the physical safety of the United States travelers, unquote. I don't have a problem with this, but I do. Because, again, it's almost broad. You can take the U.S. government could be like, oh yeah, it's only going to the country we have conflict with, like with Russia or Ukraine or China. But then it also comes into play of, well, now we're just going to restrict you going to Canada and Mexico because they're also in their own personal conflict. And then the government can go, oh, we deem it necessary because it's a little sketchy and we don't want you to be in danger. So we're looking out for your best interest. And yeah, that's how it's going to go. That's why I don't like this. That's why a lot of people don't like this. It's so broad, whether you think so or not. It is. And the government always makes things broad because they want to leave it an open window so they can go, let me just push that open a little bit. Okay, now it's wide open. Now I can do whatever I want. That's the beauty of the government. They went on to post another article stating Presidential Emergency Action Document. So then they go on to list a few of what they would actually do. One is alien enemies and dangerous persons within the U.S. They also go on to say suspend the right, essentially denying the individual or individuals the right to appear before court to plead their case. They can revoke that if they need to make sure that terrorists, whether domestic or not, can just be thrown in jail and never dealt with, and they just rot in there the rest of their lives. They can also provide for various forms of martial law. That was what had happened when Trump was in office, is he wanted to do martial law over in Portland, Oregon. That was where an emergency act was going to come in, and he was going to take the right to do martial law because he felt it and deemed it necessary that it needed to happen. But then you also go on to issue a general warrant for search and seize of people or property. That's the thing, is when you have a warrant to go into someone's house, property, apartment, to seize that person, as in arrest that person, you have to have a warrant, but it has to be a specific warrant. It cannot be a broad. So if you were to come and get me and say, we have a warrant for your arrest, we can come in and seize you in your apartment because you refuse to come out, and I ask why, you have to give me a specific reason. You cannot just say because. You have to give me a specific reason of, I didn't go to court for a citation and it's been 3 years and they finally came for me. Something of that matter. But this issue is now saying for whatever reason, a general reason. So literally I could be stocking up on food too much and someone narcs me out, and now they can come in and be like, we have a warrant for your arrest and we're going to seize your property and we're going to take you to jail. What for? We don't need to tell you. We're just going to do it. That is part of it. They can also declare a state of war. Again, very, very broad. Is it a state of war on the people? Is it a state of war on another country? That's what's going on. Very, very broad. A state of war. What kind? We don't know until it happens. And then they go on to say authorize censorship of news reporters. So that includes independent journalists of any kind, like myself. If they see fit that independent journalists or certain news stations are giving false information of any kind, we will be arrested. That's when the general warrant of seizing or searching people's property comes into play. They can literally be like, we have a warrant for your arrest. Why? We don't have to tell you. Then I get there and they tell me, because you're an independent journalist and you said false information. What information did I say false? We don't have to tell you. I get thrown in jail. I don't get the right to a court appeal or a court hearing. And I'm literally locked in prison for the rest of my life. This is how the Emergency Act will go. There are so many broad reasons why this is a problem. Anything and everything they decide to put in that document, we will not be aware of until it is put into effect. Literally, the moment that they broadcast it and say there's a declaration of emergency declaration, no one's going to know until they read it off on the television or say it on the radio and list off everything that is going to be seized, who's going to be arrested, what's going on. There will be martial law. Then the people will riot. The American people will riot and fight tooth and nail until the end. And that will be worse than having a war in a different country. That's almost worse than having China come over here and try to take us over. Why? You're fighting against your own neighbor. You don't know who's going to narc you out for something, so you're terrified and you're paranoid. I personally would almost rather have someone that was a foreigner trying to kill me or arrest me versus the neighbor that I know next door. That's the hard part about all of this. And another fun factor about this emergency declaration is they have also stated that they can do a, quote, kill switch on the internet. They can either completely remove it, turn it off, unplug it, or they can literally black out certain people like myself, certain comedians, certain Hollywood stars even. But a lot of people that they would black out is people like me, the independent journalists that are just here trying to report the truth. So, I will have all the links in the description for you. I will also try to put some screenshots, because I have a lot of editing to do on this, but I will try to do my best to get some screenshots up and working for you. But yes. But anyways, thank you for watching. Do your research. Stay safe.